Okay, so you want to be a manager. This is something that many of you, perhaps most of you, maybe even all of you, will ask yourself this question sometime in your career. So that's the reason we're going to be speaking about this today. Well, the clicker did work before. Oh, it still works. Good. So I want to ask a quick question about the people here in the audience, if you'll roll with me. Could you please raise your hand if you've been in the field for over a year? More than 2 years? 3? More than 5? Other hand, if you've ever considered being a manager? Clap if you are a manager. And I want you to stand up if you became a manager and are not a manager anymore. Anybody in the room? Here we go. We only have one? Only one. Okay, you brave soul. Oh, there's another one over here. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to address this question that many of us will either ask ourselves or be asked sometime in our career. Do I want to be a manager? Maybe, maybe not. And I hope that today I'm going to give you a little bit more insight about that. So who am I? Why do I have the right to be on this stage? As you can see from the backdrop of my picture, that kind of exemplifies that I do read a lot of books. Big bookworm of genres you might not think that I'm into, but maybe yes, like science fiction and fantasy. Nothing nonfiction, that's boring. I have a lot of kids. I have 6 of them. So when I talk about being a manager, I'm a manager even if I'm not even working. And I'm a senior engineering manager at Chegg. And when it comes to job titles, every job title means something different depending on where you work. So in my company, a senior engineering manager means I manage managers. I'm actually at this position relatively for a short amount of time. I started at that one about 7 months ago, and previously I was an engineering manager. By the way, Chegg is an American company that deals with educational technology, and I always say that in long form because it's ed tech, not ad tech, so educational technology, and we provide all kinds of tools for students in all parts of the journey. So let's get to it. This is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what management is, why people go into it, why people maybe shouldn't go into it as well, different career paths that ones can take, my very strong opinions on hands-on management, and some final thoughts. So what is management that we're going to be discussing today? Well, for those who are familiar or not familiar, this is the pointy-haired boss from Dilbert Comics, and this is actually not the person who we would like to aspire to be when we're a manager, but what we do want to do is we want to be leaders. We want to be leadership. And there's something very important I'd like to highlight here, that when I'm talking about management, I'm specifically talking about people management, managing people, because leadership should be something that everybody can do in any time and any stage of their career. Great quote over here, that leadership is action. It's not a position. So whether you're an engineer or a team lead or even a junior engineer can have leadership positions by doing a multitude of things, whether it's mentoring, teaching, leading certain initiatives, etc. You don't need the title of a people manager to be able to do that function. So what are we talking about? Anybody here familiar with the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott? Great book. If you haven't read it, recommended. So she defines a manager as somebody who guides a team to execution. So what is guidance? Guidance is giving feedback, growing your people, guiding. A team. What is a team? What is a manager's job as a team? Is creating that team, creating that unit, okay? And to execution, that's pretty self-evident. If we don't know what execution is, I mean, here we are at a DevOps conference. You all guys know what execution is. So that's a very high-level definition of what a people manager does. Now, if I were to go into detail here about all the different things that a manager does, we could spend a lot more than 20 minutes on that, but I'm not going to. So those are the main things that we're going to be talking about is a people manager. Now, why? Why do people go into management? Anybody? One word. Why? Okay. How about this one? All right. That could be a reason, right? People think, okay, money is in management. What else? Power. Impact. Prestige, impact. Yeah, I wish I had a dynamic kind of choose your own adventure one that any word you say, that would be the slide that comes on, but sorry, we're not up to that. Maybe AI, maybe Chat GPT-4 would be able to do that for me, but not yet. So power, prestige, seniority. Yeah, the person who's most senior in the team gets to be the manager. Maybe. Sounds like a great reason, right? I mean, I've been here the longest. I must be the person who can lead people the best. No. Maybe the best developer on the team. Anybody have Did anybody of you ever work under a manager who was the best developer and became the worst manager? Yeah? Okay. Bad reason to become a manager. Bad reason to become a manager. Anybody who's worked under one of those? Ouch. How about, I don't want to have on-call. Isn't that a great reason to be a manager? Spoiler, as a manager, I was on-call too, because if you're a manager, you're on the escalation policy. So when your engineer doesn't get up, you get called anyway. One more reason, how about I'll take all the boring things and delegate them to other people, right? Any task I don't want to do, I don't have to do. I can give it to somebody else. A great reason to become a manager. Doesn't work like that. What happens is when you try to delegate those really, really bad tasks, somehow you wind up having to do them anyway. So, yeah. Okay. Another reason is because that's the only path there is. I want to move forward. The next step is to become a manager, right? That's self-evident. Wrong. Correct. How about you just love working with people? Should that be a good reason to become a manager? That, if you take away one thing from this talk, that is the only reason to become a manager. If you do not love people, you are not going to be a good people manager, because when things are going great and everything's fine and you're working with the people, yay. Things aren't always going great. You're going to have to deal with people and their stuff and their challenges. And if you don't like working with them, you're going to have a really hard time, because people at the end of the day are not as easy as working with your code and working with your systems. And however hard your CI pipeline might be, it's a lot more simple than any person that you know. Okay. In the words of the great man, if you want to make everyone happy, don't be a leader. Sell ice cream. As a manager, you're going to make people unhappy. You're going to have to make hard choices. You're going to have to do that. And at least if you're doing something that you love with the people, it makes it a little bit easier. All right, so let's talk about career paths. We said if management is the only way forward, why should that be? We all start our career at the same place. Whether you start it formally or not, you start out as a junior. All right? And then you become mid or just without the junior. I remember the point in my career when I was like, can I take the junior off my name? It was really ironic. I was working in this little startup, and I was at least 10 years older than all the people I'm working with. And they would say, oh, and here's Leah, our junior iOS engineer. I'm like, okay, can I be a not junior anymore? So after a couple of years, I got to nix that one. All right, so next comes senior. And then the big question is, what's next? So in a lot of places, the only step forward is to become a manager. Why? Why? Management is a different career. Why is that the next step on the ladder? So you come to a crossroads and you say, all right, that maybe is the next step, maybe not. What should I choose? So if we're going down the IC, which is the individual contributor path, right, to continue not to manage other people, there are other steps, right? You could go, I'm a staff engineer, principal engineer, a distinguished engineer. I mean, the sky's the limit, but you could stay not having to manage people your entire career. Continue to make good money, good impact, a lot of influence. You could still be the most senior person, and you don't have to manage people if you don't want to. On the other hand, at this crossroads, there's also the management track, and then you start out as whatever. All the titles are different depending on the company that you work in. By the way, at the end, either the IC or the management could be VP engineering or CTO or whatever. Okay, but it really is a diversion. And if I would have made a Venn diagram of the skills needed to be a good developer and a good manager, there is relatively small overlap. Someone said promotion? No, a management is not a promotion. It's a new career, okay? Now, here comes a very important word. This word, I believe, is very magical. Expectations is the key to success and failure in so many different ways. I'm not talking just about at work, but when your manager approaches you and says, would you like to be a manager? The question should be, what does that mean? Because it means something different to everybody. Like, what is a team lead? What is a people lead? What is, so you really need to get clarity what the expectations are, especially if you want to continue your hands-on expertise, but we'll get to hands-on in a moment. Okay, another very important thing to consider if you are considering changing careers and becoming a manager is that you need training and support. Whether it's formal training, whether it's a support system inside of your company or outside of it, you don't wake up in the morning necessarily a good manager. Some people are born with a lot of good skills, but the same way you weren't born a good engineer, you might not be born a good manager also. And even if you are, there's certainly a lot of input that you can get from other people to help you improve your skills. And believe me, the people that are your direct reports will thank you for getting your training. In the company that I work in, they have something called the Culture Amp survey. It's an internal survey, an anonymous survey where they ask 1 million questions to all the different people. And then each manager gets a readout of the reports and they make some company-wide observations. And one of the things that they observed that with regards to employee satisfaction and satisfaction with their manager, the scores were higher under managers who had received training. So that's a real thing. Good for you and your people. All right, let's talk about hands-on management. What is hands-on management? Well, first I'll tell you what it's not. So first startup I worked in was run by some ultra-Orthodox men. And at one of the stand-ups, one of them came out, the CEO, and he says, our goal this year is to touch thousands of college students. So we're not talking about that kind of hands-on management. We're talking about the kind where you're spending a percentage of your time doing whatever you're doing, right? Either whether it's writing code or deploying services or whatever anybody does in their field. So when I was a junior developer, I didn't start out being a developer. I had previous life skills doing other things. I was a teacher for many years. I worked as a project manager in a startup. When I came to tech, I was relatively old, again, hence the junior. And I was thinking that, all right, I have an opportunity now to do some management. I have a lot of management experience, but I really like writing code. I really like that. So my dream job was to do both. This magical unicorn. Wow. But didn't turn out like that, because what happens in reality is if you're a hands-on manager, it works well if the scope is quite limited. If you have one direct report, two direct reports, but as your team grows, right? Once you have like 5, 6, 7 direct reports, if you still have a lot of time to be writing quality code, you probably aren't doing a great job as a manager because you're not having enough time for your people. So because what happens is there has to be some kind of balance, right? So you're either developing, managing, managing. And let's say you're great at both. I work with somebody he was very, very insistent. He wanted to continue being a developer and a manager. He had 10 people on his team. He really killed himself doing both. And then you miss out on the third thing is yourself, right? So if you're spending all your hours doing both, you're just killing yourself. So at the end of the day, it's not a great trade-off. I actually was really excited that Charity Majors was going to be doing the keynote because she's somebody who I quote every time I talk about management. I was like, wow, I'm going to get to meet her. So I'll quote her now anyway. So one of the things that she talks about is the career ladder of a developer, the ladder versus the pendulum. Okay, so you can be either climbing the ladder to the next stages, like we did before on the slide showing what the next logical progression is of your career, or you could be a manager, an engineer. A manager, an engineer. She says you can be a great manager, you could be a great engineer, not at the same time. I agree with her. If you're really spending all your energies being great at one of those, if your team is big enough, again, when we're talking about 1 or 2 direct reports, you can still be relatively hands-on. But as your team grows, it just doesn't make sense anymore. So it's not like if you make the decision that you want to be a manager, that you're stuck there forever. No. If you want to go back to being a developer, that's fine. It used to be a little weird in the industry for people to decide, I don't want to be a manager. And people would be like, why? Why do you want to do that? But I know now, even when we're hiring and you see people's resumes and you see they have been a manager, now they're looking for an IC position, it's now much more legitimate than it was in the past. People understand that there's a time for this, time for that, and you can make that move back and forth. So not hands-on management, but what about hands-warm management? Hands-warm management means how about I can keep my skills still warm, not at the expense of my team. So how can we do that? Actually, there was a great talk about that at Reversing this year. Somebody named Oren Ellenbogen gave a talk about how to keep your skills warm while being a manager. But some of the points are to take things that are not in the critical path, or to be working on things that are not how to use a specific tool, but why we chose a specific tool, and to keep technical, perhaps doing code reviews, etc., without blocking your team, because no team wants to be on the team where I can't get a hold of my manager because she's busy writing the critical feature that we need for release. That's not a good position to be in. Okay, so let's do some more thoughts. Somebody at my company said, no one retires being a software developer, which means at some point I'm going to have to be a manager. So that is so not true. First of all, I can tell you my father retired at age 72 as a senior software engineer. So, okay, I've seen it in my house, but you see it more and more now. People can be older and be developers still. You don't have to become a manager just because you're senior in your field. So if you go back to the tracks, if this is your passion and you want to be a senior software engineer, you don't need to ever let anybody push you out of that spot. However, you don't want to get into a position that you're just doing the same thing again and again and again. So how do we keep our skills and keep growing without climbing the ladder? So I'm going to introduce this kind of matrix. The knowledge and the capabilities, right? The knowledge that the knowledge of a specific thing and the capabilities that you have to be able to do specific things. So let's say nobody wants to be here, right? You don't know anything and you don't have the abilities of it. And nobody wants to be here either, that you got a lot of knowledge, but you can't do anything with it. So the question is, where do we want to be in our career? What do you say? What do you say? A or B? A or B? A or B? Okay. A or B? I say that what you want to do is you want to be going from B to A constantly. Why? We want to be in a place where we have the abilities to learn something new, but yet don't possess all the knowledge yet. Learning new tools, learning new technologies, working on features we've never heard of before, because when you're in B, you're in the growth zone. You're challenging yourself to gain more knowledge of something that you don't currently have. And once you move up to A, all right, that's the comfort zone. You know everything, you know how to do it. These are the things that you can do in your sleep, but at some point your knowledge is going to get stale if you're not going back to B constantly. So this doesn't matter if you're an individual contributor or a manager. You should always be trying to be going in the growth zone and sharpening your skills. So here comes the question to you. Is your next step management? Well, let's recap quickly on the things we said. Here's the first one. Okay, so this is a really easy one because when you start this flow chart, if the answer is no, you don't even have to continue to the next step. So first and foremost, you gotta love people in order to be a good people manager. Next, expectations. Expectations are like a contract that both sides need to know very well. So when you are asked or when you're looking at a job description, make sure you understand what the responsibilities are. If you're being told, okay, you're going to have it's going to be a hands-on management position. You're going to be managing 7 developers and you're expected to write code 70% of the time. Buyer beware, big red flag. Next, support, help, community. And last and not least, if you decide you don't want to, do something else. Go back to doing something else. That shouldn't be the reason to prevent you from even trying, because you should know there's always a way back. And for people who like things, words, here's words. Okay, if anybody wants the words. Okay, here's different reasons why you should consider becoming a manager. And always remember that you can change your mind if you don't like it. That's it. That's it for me. And as somebody who is visually challenged and not great at making slides, I really appreciate the free things that people offer. So thanks to everybody. Thank you for being a great audience and enjoy the rest of DevOps Days.